So I want to talk briefly about this water containment system that I have and how I pump water out of it. I used to use, well, I still use this I think it's like an 1.5-inch gas powered pump, but I use that to get the water into some of my stock tanks. And what I want to have is a way to just have like a hose and you squeeze the thing and it sprays water out, or I can connect my pressure washer to it, basically like a spigot off of your house but connected to rainwater. So what I did was I picked up this cheap, wonderful Harbor Freight quality pressure pump, and let me make sure you can see this okay. So this was, it was on sale for 100 and I think 30, I want to say, but it's got a bladder. It's basically like a well. If you had a shallow well in the country or whatever, you'd use something like this. There's a air bladder in here. You take this thing off and you fill this up with a designated PSI, forget what it is offhand, like 18 or 30 pounds or something. So you pressurize that, and then you got your water that comes in here. The pump will pressurize it, and then this switch basically kicks off the motor at a certain PSI. And then this bladder keeps it where you have a nice amount of pressure for like a garden hose, or if you're feeding a pressure washer or whatever. So my idea was to get one of these, and I did some research online. The quality seems to be pretty good. For Harbor Freight, I mean, you know, listen, they make a lot of junk, but some of their stuff is not bad, and I haven't fired this thing up yet. So, I mean, it could be dead out of the box. Who knows? I'm sure it's fine, but 23 PSI, by the way, it says it right here. You can get a little shot of that. So is it focusing? Not too well. So that's 23 PSI. There's the gauge, the switch is under here, stainless steel braided line. I'll check to make sure these are all tight and stuff. Sometimes they are not the tightest from the factory, but anyways, this I felt like this is a pretty good value. So how I'm going to hook things up, I have, and I'll show you this in a little bit, but I have a IBC intermediate bulk container up tote. It stores 275 gallons of water. I have 3 of them distributed around my farm here, and I have metal roof, obviously, because you don't want to use asphalt, because you don't want to drink that or use that. So the water goes into my gutters, it fills up the IBC tote. Then this is going to be connected to, I'm going to have a big blue filter here somewhere, connected here. I'll show you that in a second too. But so there'll be like a, just a sediment filter almost. It'll capture, like, if big stuff gets in there, like pieces of leaves or whatever, because you don't want any like dirty water getting inside this. You want it to be fairly clean. So clean water is going to go into here, pressurizes it. You need water, it depletes the bladder. The bladder pressurizes the water, but as soon as that starts going low, the pressure switch kicks on, boom, starts pumping your water. So the quality seems to be fairly decent for Harbor Freight. I screwed in, these are 1-inch national pipe thread, and I'm still figuring out what I want to do. I have some shark bite style. I think I want to make this part easily removable in case I have to fix something. But this is basically, I'm going to bring this out, and I might attach something here that has some kind of manifold where I can hook up, a garden hose or the pressure washer or something. So I picked up some fittings here. This allows you to take it apart. They unscrew. There's a rubber O-ring in there, so this is kind of nice to have in order to get from the 2-inch. So I have something like this on the tote now. So this threads in, and then there's a piece of 2-inch that will, if you could imagine, I don't have the 2-inch here, but if you could imagine a 2-inch stub or nipple connecting to this would get me down to 1 inch. They didn't have any fittings that went directly from 2 inch to 1 inch. I had to use this reducer from the 2 to 1.5 inches, and then this goes from 1.5 inches to inch. So kind of cobbled, but I guess that's what we have. I might take these ball valves back simply for the fact that the tank has one, and I can always shut the water off at the IBC tote. So originally what I've been doing is I thread this cobbled mess onto the tote, and then I open up this ball valve, and it gives me enough pressure to run my my pressure washer. So, but then there's times where like the dog gets filthy and the water pressure coming out of the tote isn't that great because it's basically laying on a pallet, so it's not up high enough where you get really good, you know, gravity action. So I feel like this will help. So what I did was, I know this is kind of a long-winded segment here. This is, you know, I'm just trying to help people out with collecting rainwater and trying to figure out a plan of attack. But so this I bought years ago, Pent Air Big Blue. So this has a huge base to it, and you know, you figure it's, I have the base in my basement. I mean, I'll eventually show you guys all this stuff, but there's a big base, and then the filter goes into it. So you'll see from, I got this on Amazon. I honestly don't remember the price. I don't think it was more than $50. They recommend that you run, I think, lags through here. And I should have videotaped this the other night. I just didn't think about it. But I was able to tap this. And I just, I went and looked at the old bolts bin here, and 5/16 cap was all I needed. So I tapped it 5/16 with a tap set, and it's plastic, so it tapped really easy. And I thought this was going to be better than putting in lags. I mean, I don't know, like, why they couldn't do this from the factory. So I don't know. People may or may not be able to tap this. If you have a tap and die set, this is really easy to tap. If you don't, then I guess lags, you can just run them in with your impact or something. But so I also noticed that they have a bracket, of course, that they charge extra for. So what I ended up doing was I found this piece of 1/8 plate, just some scrap stuff. And again, I apologize for not making any videos of this, but it took me maybe an hour to do all this stuff. I wish they would make something like this. The bracket that they provide, I was reading about some of the reviews, and people just say that it's really flimsy. So I decided to make my own. And this fits on here, and it clears the little button here, the check valve, and then those bolts thread in here. And like a dummy, I didn't think about this. I'm still going to have to weld this onto something, so I'll have to grind this off. So I'm going to leave this just primed. But you can see kind of what I did. It's a 3-inch, it's 3x3 here, so it was pretty easy to make. So I just kind of found the centers of 3x3, and then I hit it with a center punch, and I drilled them out for 5/16, and then I opened them up a tiny bit, at least this one. I think I might have had to open up another one with a file just so it fit a little bit better, because I mean, you know, it wasn't perfect when you're drilling. The drill kind of walks even with a hole punch. And then I hogged this out. I had a big 3/4 inch bit, and I hogged this out, and then I kind of mangled that with the file so that it would fit on here. So I feel like this, you know, because you figure there's going to be, I don't know, probably close to a gallon of water in there. So 8 pounds plus all the filter stuff. I mean, it's going to weigh at least 12 pounds. I figure 10, 12 pounds hanging. So this, and again, I apologize, I don't have the base. It's down in the basement. But this will be like, you know, it'll be in line, kind of, you know, like this. So let me set this down again. So, you know, we'll be working with something like this, and I'm going to put everything on, you know, a piece of wood or something, and then I'll build some kind of cage out of bed frame, some kind of angle, and then so this will be here. You have a filter, so gravity fed water will go into here, and we won't have to prime anything because the gravity will bring the water to this. I'm a big believer in keeping things simple. So that's how that's going to work. And then I'll make, like I said, I'll make some kind of manifold where you can plug your junk into, your garden hose, pressure washer, whatever. But so this turned out pretty well, pretty easy to do. Like I said, the reviews I saw on Amazon, they said that they were really terrible quality. A lot of people had to weld pieces of angle to beef them up, because they said once they attached them to their wall or to whatever, the weight of the filter and the water just ended up bending everything. So I figure if you can make it yourself and make it better, you might as well do it. So the next video, I'm going to try to combine this into like one series. So we're going to, the magic of YouTube's, the next couple of clips you'll see are me making the base for this thing that's going to attach to a piece of wood or something. I imagine I'll get a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and just kind of bolt all this stuff together just to kind of see how it lines up. And then what I was thinking eventually, because this will be outside, I can either get like a Rubbermaid tote and just kind of cover it up so that it keeps the water and stuff off of it. But that's basically the idea, and I feel like it can be cheap enough. I'm trying to stay under $300 to have a really nice water solution that's pressurized and available when I need it. To wash the dog, to clean the dirt bikes, to clean the tractor, to hook up my pressure washer, stuff like that. If the kids want to fill up water balloons or something like that, this I feel like is a better solution than just hooking up off of your well pump and constantly using your well pump that just puts strain on everything. I'm a big believer in not using water out of the ground if you have the availability to use it from the sky. Mother Nature's hooking us up, we might as well use it. And I try to keep on hand, about 2,000 to 3,000 gallons of water. And it's very easy to collect if you're able to collect it. I know some parts of the Pacific Northwest, it's like illegal to collect rainwater, which is crazy. But around here, it's not a big deal. So, again, sorry for the long-winded video, but there will be more to come here, and hopefully someone out there will find this useful. So I harvest rainwater here because I think it's the right thing to do. No garbage, garbage dog. And so this building has a fairly big roof surface, and then so does our barn. It's all steel, it's not asphalt, which you don't want to use for harvesting rainwater because you get all the oils and toxins from the shingles in there. But anyways, so I like to harvest rainwater. It's good for watering my garden, my plants, washing the dog off when she gets muddy. I wash the dirt bikes, the four-wheelers. It's great for washing cars with because it's very naturally balanced as far as the pH goes.
Is it heavy?
Yeah. Probably weighs like 60 pounds. So this is a Harbor Freight shallow well pump. It's got a bladder in it. I think I talked about it earlier. And it's set up for 1-inch national pipe taper, national pipe thread. Some people, I think it's national pipe taper. Anyways, so I think when I last left off, I was talking about this. So I made a bracket, which you can see here, out of just like scrap angle iron, and I painted it. So pretty simple stuff. And I made a little bracket here that holds the valve here. So that worked pretty good. And then this is, I think I lagged this down onto like these little skids. I just used plywood, and this is bolted with just 1/4-20 hardware. There is a check valve or a foot valve, depending on who calls it what. So basically, and I'm going to show this, I'm going to set it up so you guys can see it. I put an 1.25 sump pump hose into this with just a hose clamp, and I turn this on. The gravity of the tote, which I'll show you in a second, will fill everything up. And then there's a filter in here to filter out any particles, leaves, you know, the junk that falls off trees, little spinny guys. And then I have these unions up here in case I have to take stuff apart. I did notice one thing that you'll want to make sure that you do when using these PVC fittings. They have to be super tight. I think that's why they recommend in the owner's manual to use iron, because it's hard to get these really tight. I want to say this one drips a tiny bit. It weeps a little bit. So I can always take this union apart, crank this down a little bit, and then screw the union back on. So you just go like this to take off the union. It's a good idea in order to service things that you have unions that you can take apart. So anyways, full inch PVC goes to this. So I just kind of threw this on here to see if two hoses would work. It should. The idea is to set this up outside next to one of my totes and to always leave it on. I'll run a GFCI outside into some kind of like weatherproof box, and then if the kids need to fill up water balloons or wash the dog off or something, they can just turn this pump on. So we're going to go outside and I'll show you the kind of tanks I use and some do's and don'ts. So this is an IBC tank. Stands for intermediate bulk container. Hey, no, it's just rust. Hey,
Why is he even
stop.
bothering me?
I don't know. It's got a lot of energy, old rust. These can be found pretty cheap. If you look on Craigslist and stuff, you can get them pretty cheap. This one I think I paid 40 bucks for. It has, this one's Chinese. It's made, it's made a little bit different than some of the US tanks, which I'm going to show in a second. I'm going to try to make this video as informational as possible, but this has like this really proprietary 3-inch fitting, and you can take this stuff off. There's a company called Banjo Fittings, I believe, if you Google them, and they make different valves. They're actually sending me one to fix this to get it right to 2-inch. So I had to go from 3-inch to this 2-inch and then to this 1.25 inch. The big issue I have with this is this piece of plastic cracked, and I have it epoxied, and it still kind of leaks, and then it broke again, and I epoxied it again. So I'm going to get rid of this tank, and I'm going to use a different one. All right, this is the tank you want to get. It's made by a company called Schultz, S-C-H-U-T-Z. This stuff uses pretty common hardware. I have a Fernco coupler onto this. I just jam a piece of 2-inch. I use this one primarily for filling up a larger stock tank, and I'll show that in a second. But this is a standard 2-inch end, and you can basically adapt anything to it, and I'll show that in a second. All right, so here we have another Schultz tank. This one's kind of ratty looking just because I was mowing and chopping stuff everywhere, but I just have it gutter, basically a downspout running right into it. So if we take this cap off, you'll see it's got 2-inch NPT, so you can thread in whatever you want. So when you're looking at these tanks, make sure to bring a piece of 2-inch PVC with you, and that it, you know, a female coupler. Make sure it screws on. These valves are very robust. They last a long time. I've had this tank outside, drained of course. I don't leave any water in it, and I open up the drains. You know what, let me get out of the wind here. Good. I had to get out of the wind. So I've had all these tanks now for years. I leave them outside year-round. In the wintertime, like around October, I drain them, and then I leave those valves open so that if, like, you know, condensation gets in there or whatever, it doesn't mess a valve up. I've never broken a valve. Everything's worked fine, and they seem to be good tanks. Even that Chinese one, I mean, the problem is that fitting, so I got to get that sorted out. But these tanks work good. They're fairly cheap and inexpensive to find online, and if you can buy them in bulk, like I bought off this one guy, I bought 3 of them, I think for 60 bucks. He just wanted to get rid of them. You got to make sure what was inside of them. A lot of times you can get brine solution in them, you know, for pickling, or soaps, detergents. That kind of stuff is okay to use. You just got to flush it out good. I wash mine out with a power washer. But you want to stay away from stuff that had, excuse me, you want to stay away from stuff that had chemicals in it. That could be really bad, obviously. Sometimes you see them that have paint in them, and if the paint is water-based, that's not a big deal. You can wash that out. But basically, I do not use these for water. They're not potable drinking. You could filter it, I guess, with a ceramic filter and maybe get away with it, but I choose not to do that. I think it's a little on the sketchy side. So I'm going to show you what else I use to store water in a bigger tank. Okay, so this tank is 550 gallons. I have another 275-gallon Schultz tank. Again, I apologize if there's wind noise. Okay, so again, Schultz tank. You can tell because it says it on the valve. And this one, again, is a 2-inch. So that's what you want. You're going to want to spend, even if you got to spend a little bit more money, you want to get these kind. But anyway, so this tank is 550 gallons. I think you can read it up there. I don't know how good this one I actually bought. You're probably not going to believe this, but I bought this tank for $50. It had a huge gash in it. It was cut by a fork of a forklift. So what I did was I got some Gorilla Glue, the 2-part epoxy, mixed it up, and I basically, it was like a big wound, like a hatchet wound almost, a gouge. I filled it up as best as I could, and I let it dry, and then I did it again, and then I just put duct tape over to make like a Band-Aid. And this tank, I mean, there's thousands of pounds of water in it right now, and it's been holding just fine. So anyways, this again, 2-inch. I have it all plumbed. You could hook up a garden hose if you want. Here's a drain, and then you just crack this, and water starts flying out. So this I have set up to hook up for just the this I have you hook up the sump plastic hose, and I'll show that next, because I think that's it's a pretty cost-effective way of moving water around. I just have a whole bunch of this hose, and then if I need to make it longer, I just make like a little coupler. You probably could buy couplers too. The stuff is really cheap on Amazon. I apologize for the wind. It's always windy here. So, and then I have it set up so it's just easy to use with my pump. And this part, I don't put a fitting on. I either slip it in that one tank, or I can add a fitting on here and screw it onto the other tanks. To move water quickly, I actually bought years ago, at least 10 years ago, I bought this Harbor Freight, another cheap, I think this is like 1.5 inch water pump. Let me see, if it says, yeah, it doesn't say. But this thing, I mean, you can see it's pretty nasty looking, mangled. It's fallen off the truck before, but this has been a really, really solid pump. I think it's a Lifan motor. I make sure to run good gas in it. It's got a fuel shut-off valve, so I'll usually turn that off and run the carb out of gas. But again, 2-inch, you can hook it up however you want. This, I just kind of use it as like a quick disconnect. And then this is where it comes out, so I have it filling up the tanks and stuff. But that's kind of how I move water around pretty cheaply. A pump like this, if you get a coupon or if it's on sale, probably $100, $125, and it's been really reliable. I think, I change oil every season, or whenever I can remember to do it, and it works really well for pumping. So now we're going to set up the Harbor Freight pump that with the bladder in it, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to jam old hosey hose on here.
Hosey hose.
If I had to do this again, and I might still do this, I'll put some kind of piece of metal from here to here to strengthen this up a little bit. But really, once you have this set up, the idea is I'm going to put this in some kind of outdoor enclosure. Like a Rubbermaid makes those things where you can put your garden stuff in. I was going to put it in that, and then that way I don't have to worry about water and stuff getting on it. But anyway, so open. and then we open up our tank. This will start to fill. You press this little button, it lets all the air out, and I can actually feel it. I can feel like the water coming in. Because when you here, go in the back there so the wind stays off here. When you plug this thing in, it fires up. So you want to make sure that you have water in it, and all the as much air as possible out of it. There's a priming plug on the side here, so if you don't have gravity like I do, you can use the priming plug. Plug in the power. What's going to happen is this thing's going to turn on, and we're going to come over here. Camera girl will come over here and get the here, step over here, watch the hose though, and get that pressure gauge.
Where?
See the pressure gauge right here? Watch this fill up. So I'm going to plug it in right now. It's going to kick on. Once it reaches pressure, it'll shut off. At least it should. It fills pretty fast. I think it's a 1-horse motor. Okay, so now it's off. If I turn this on.
Can I go back in my car?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, get it away from me!
Oh, don't worry, I won't watch it. I gotta tighten up that fitting, but you can see there's now, I got pretty good pressure.
Oh, I wanna try.
So, here, you wanna? Alright, don't get me wet.
Okay.
Go ahead, go over there. Go in the grass if you want a little bit. Alright, don't get the dog wet. Well, yeah, you're blowing it into the wind. Blow that way, towards the bush. So now you basically have full pressure. Kicks on when it needs to. I'm gonna have to tighten up this fitting here. Something's leaking. Oh, you know what? It's this hose. This hose needs a. This hose is messed up. This is cracked. But anyways. So yeah, so that's the setup. It works pretty well, and again, I have it just hooked up right here. This is leaking again because, like I said, it was cracked. I'm gonna replace it. I got another tank that I'm gonna replace it. I'm gonna replace this fitting. But once you set all this stuff up, and if you have non-leaky junk like me, you should be good to go for a long time. So I'm gonna step out of the wind. So yeah, it works pretty well. I'm happy with it. I'm happy with the way it came out. And all told, you know, it took me some time to get that pump figured out and set up the way that I wanted it to be. Yeah, I want to say the pump was like 120 or 130 bucks. It was on sale, or I had a coupon. You know how it is with Harbor Freight. All the fittings and stuff, I had a lot of it lying around, but I did buy some. And I also returned a lot of stuff that I didn't need. So figure, you know, with pipe and the fittings, call that another 25 or 30 bucks. And you have a pump that's ready to go. You know, tanks, they vary depending on how well they sell and stuff like that. Figure, you know, tanks are going to cost anywhere on the low side of 30 to the high side of maybe 75 or 100 bucks if you get good ones. But, you know, rain is free. It's a great way to conserve. I'm a big believer in it. If you can, you know, get it from the sky, you might as well use it. So, but hopefully this will give you some ideas. If you have any questions on my setup or need help, you know, with anything, drop me a comment. I feel like I'm well versed in these crazy IBC totes just for the fact that I've learned a lot about them over the years and how to plumb them and figure them out. But they've been pretty solid for me. So thanks again for watching. I appreciate all the new subscribers. I think we picked up a few along the way here, so I greatly appreciate that. And I hope you guys have a good day.